I'd like to welcome all of you here to the Lancaster Historical Society's first program of the new season. This cemetery, as you can see, was established in 1798, and all the other cemeteries were being filled. So, at one point, this cemetery was filled, and it was in 1843 that they voted appropriation to move this forward. And what you can see is basically, see where that big evergreen tree is with the older slate stones? From there forward is the new addition. So a few people are in here.
They paid $53
Yep.
to Mrs. Thayer for the land.
So some really notable people are buried in here. A lot of Revolutionary War soldiers are buried in here, and Civil War. So what we'll do, let's move along.
It's actually an acre .53 wide, and there's over 957 people buried in the middle cemetery.
All right, what you'll notice here, going down this road, is all these veteran flags. And it was very interesting when I came through here many years ago, and I'm going, why are they all going down the road here? And when I started looking at all the stones, these are all, I think, reserved spots going down for your Revolutionary War soldiers. So it was, I guess, an honor to be buried right on the edge of the road. And what we have here is the part of the Sawyer family that are here, which was quite a large family, a very early family. There were the earlier ones buried into the old settlers, which we are going down into next. So anyways, it was just a point of information. Also, if you want to we'll just move along.
I just wanted to point out Mr. Stearns' grave marker there. Eli Stearns, he was a big house right here in town, and he was instrumental in helping build the church, and a lot of the houses on Neck Road he designed. And there were over 700 men from Lancaster who served in the Revolutionary War. And if you remember the time, 1776, that was when most of us were still in Lancaster's boundaries. A few of the towns had split off, like Sterling, and so we had still in Harvard, but we still had most of the other towns still involved. So Bolton and all those towns would be included in the number of soldiers that served.
What
burial place is that over there with the gate around it?
We'll have to go and look at the gate. I don't know them all by heart, but we certainly can look at it. That's one of the few examples left of having iron gating, because during the war they went into the cemeteries and took a lot of the gating down to reuse it for armaments. So very few remain in the cemeteries in Lancaster.
And it's basically a very Victorian thing. If you look very closely at the stones over a progression of time, you'll see the carvings are different. And there were some really well-known stone carvers that lived in this town. If you dig down far enough, a lot of them signed on the bottom of the stone. Mr. Wilder was one of them. But what I want to bring attention to you is right over here in the corner. Yeah. This right here is a good example of trees that have been left up too long that should have been cut down. And it just, blew over. It's destroying the stones. A lot of them are just totally shattered, and there's no way of restoring them whatsoever.
Is there a record of who the stones were?
Yeah, and some of them have just been tossed to the side and not back onto the original site. So it's going to take a lot of, thank goodness most of this has all been gridded out so we can find out where they are.
Okay.
A good example of these small stones here, they're basically known as footstones. And you had your headstone, and today burials are done differently than they were back then. Now the stone and your head is against the stone facing the other direction. Basically back when you faced east, and that's when the rising is supposed to happen, when the good Lord comes back again, that is supposed to be coming out of the earth. But needless to say, at the foot, these were placed with your initials. And unfortunately, a lot of them are missing. A lot of them have been taken out and discarded over the edge over there because it made it easier for the mowers to go around them. So what we're proposing at some point, if we could get some help and people who are interested, is finding the initial and matching it up to the person and at least putting it on the back side of the stone so they'll be together. But I just wanted to point this out as a good example of what is going on, and it's just going to get progressively worse when you start looking at these trees in here. We've been fortunately not to have had a major hurricane because these trees will eventually come down and destroy a lot of these stones. A few years ago, the Historical Commission went about and got an estimate to clean up all 3 of the historic cemeteries, and the cost was $150,000 to take all the trees out. And the reason for the big cost is you can't get equipment in here. You have to get someone to climb the tree, slice it off, lower it down, and take it out. So there is the cost factor there. What we have here is a stone that was erected by the Daughters of the American Revolution. And this is the site of the first and second meeting house that was built here. And as you see, the cemetery, the old settlers is over there, the cemetery, but the first meeting house was built here and was burned by the Native Americans, better known as Indians back then. And the second also was burnt. And as we know, the minister lived across the street over here, Reverend Rowlandson, and most of us know the story about Mary Rowlandson, how she was taken captive and spent days, and then she was redeemed over in Sterling and then left town and disappeared for the longest while till some record showed up that her son was in trouble with the town, and that's how we found that she was down in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and had remarried. Yeah.
Her son was taken in captivity in that raid.
Yeah, and her daughter died. Yeah.
Through negotiations with a man in New Hampshire, Mr. Warner, and he was ruthless with the Native American people. And when he and his brother-in-law, Mr. Rowlandson and his brother-in-law had a falling out, he sold his brother-in-law into slavery into the Caribbean, and that's how he ended up in the court records. And he was found not guilty, and that was a relief, I'm sure, to his family, because going through everything that you had gone through in that time was, I think you would have PTSD big time, yeah, from being attacked and taken captive. So we're finding out little tidbits of history with primary source documents, which make it validated for the history that you have. A lot you can read on the internet is history, but it may not be from a primary source. So it's always good to go, if you have real big questions, to go to the source. The Wilders are a lot in here, and when you get down into the old burial yard, you'll see a number of the stones that are carved that have James Wilder's designs on them. And even going through the records, the primary source records, for him to validate that he was the carver of the stones was quite an ordeal for people in the 1970s and 80s who researched it and have written papers, which we have in our file in the commission office if anyone's interested in coming in and seeing them.
All right, now we're in the earliest cemetery in Lancaster. When the town was founded in 1653, this was the first burial yard. You see the meeting house was up on the hill at that point. You'll find some very early graves here. I think 1680 something, 1683 if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, is buried here. So you know it's quite early. Some of the stones have disappeared over time. Some of them have rotted away. Back when, you know, you just got a piece of stone and tried to carve their names in. Sometimes it was just a piece of wood that the name was carved into, and eventually that all, you know, decays. So this is where all your town founders are buried at this point. John Prescott, the Sawyers, who had the trucking house, which was a trading post. And that was the first basic structure that was built by the white man out here to try to trade with the Native Americans. So we'll move along here. What we have, we are very fortunate that Mr. Harold Parker surveyed this cemetery many, many years ago. And so we know exactly where everyone is, well, not everyone, but where most people are buried. You know, because some of them do have a plot, but there is no name there any longer. So, you know, we don't know. So anyways, we'll move along. What you'll see here, now these are prime examples of early stones where either the people didn't have the money to hire a stone cutter to give them a more elaborate stone. So it was just a flat piece of field stone that they carved into it. And you'll see a few of them all through here. What you'll see right here is the deed to the town of Lancaster from the Native Americans. You know, it's in memory of John Houghton. But it's, you know, very difficult to read on the face here. Also, you can see the condition of the cemetery here. It's in need also. It'd be nice someday to really prop up some of these stones to straighten them up, because if you get a slate stone or any, if it's at an angle, the weather is constantly beating on it and it's not good for the stone. So we would like to find, you know, at some point get a meeting together and then form like the Friends of the Cemetery, you know, and have a group in here and get permission from the town fathers to come in here and upright some of the stones and keep this cemetery in good condition. Because this, once you lose your history, you've lost it, you know. It's like a professor of mine once said in history class that without a past, you have no future. In the early 1800s, 1700s, mortality was always an example that people had carved on the stone, so it was always an angel primarily. As time went on, then it's getting to be weeping willows on your later stones. What you'll see here is another quite elaborate stone, Dr. John Dunsmore, and it's so unfortunate. You see the wonderful angels on the side holding up this heart, and if you look at the hearts down below, 3 of his children died at a very early age. And you know, at that period of time, a lot of diphtheria, all kinds of diseases went through with children, and you know, plagues and so forth, you know, hit the population. So, you know, back then people had a lot of children to, disperse, if you only had one or two and they died, then you're getting too old to have any more children. So they had abundant children to help with the farming chores and such. But it's just a great example of workmanship by a stone carver. What you see here is a wonderful memorial stone to John Prescott, and he was one of the founders of Lancaster, and a very industrious man. Had a woodworking and iron ore place, and a lot of it was over in Clinton, but at that point, which was Lancaster, and he and his wife are buried here. And you can see once again, early stones. And one thing about Mr. Prescott, he wasn't really a churchgoer, so he was frowned upon by a lot of people that were very religious at the point of time, and he figured his business was very important to him, so he a little rebellious for his time. But you can see once again, I'm repeating myself here, the early stones. And with the help of the prisoners from the prison and the Worcester House of Correction came down here, as Joan mentioned in the very beginning, there were like thousands of little pine trees growing here. And another 3 to 4 years there would have been little trees, and you probably would have lost this cemetery totally. It would have been taking someone with a lot of machinery to cut it all down. So we called the both departments of correction, and they were willing to come out. They said the prisoner would be happy to get out and do some work. So they came in here and pulled up all the pine trees, and this is why it looks so good at this point. And hopefully we can get them back here on a yearly basis for maintenance. What you'll find here, originally the original cemetery behind us is where it ended, in this very narrow end here. And then part of the Fair family decided to put some grave markers down here because they were very enthralled with the history of this town and were very generous with keeping up the town. So what we have here is Nathaniel Fair and his wife Pauline Revere Fair. And what you will find here, they were bushes at one point, shrubs, and we think they were great arborists and horticulturists, and a lot of plants were named after them. And the taxus, which is the Latin name for these, I think it's called Fairi, after the family. I have no definite proof because there's hundreds of them there, and I think you need someone that's a real horticulturist and knowing taxus to know which it is. But that's my summarize it. That's what they are. What you'll see here is some of the Fair family members that have been buried down here. And you can see by the stones, they're trying to stay with these slate, which is just thicker at this point. But these are all members, and over there also of the Fair family members who are buried down here.
Is this technically part of the old burial, the old settlers?
Yeah. I don't know if this land, the original ended right up there. Yeah.
Okay,
Now, whether the Fair family bought this land to continue it or not, I honestly don't know. It could be in the record somewhere. So once again, you can see massive trees in here that should be removed. But it's going to be an ongoing project, and if any of you that are here or see this presentation and would like to get involved, please come down to the Historical Commission office. We're open on Tuesdays 10 to 2. We're behind the Garofoli's, the whole Old Town, Hometown Bank, down in South Lancaster for now. And if you'd like to express your interest in doing so, or helping us in the Historical Commission office, will be greatly appreciative to be able to come down and help us, especially when we move into the new Prescott building. All our artifacts are in boxes and they need to be taken out, cataloged, photographed, and eventually put on display for the public in Lancaster. Well, I want to thank you all for coming. We'll just backtrack where we're going, how we came in, and if you have any questions along the way going out, please don't hesitate.
If anybody doesn't